In the summer of 1943, deep in the Pacific, as the war raged across oceans and skies, a young American pilot was quietly building a legend. His name was Richard Ira Bong, a farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, with calm eyes, an unshakable hand, and an extraordinary gift for flight. He wasn't born into war, nor molded by ambition. He was shaped by the wide, open skies of his hometown, by endless horizons that taught him patience, precision, and humility. Before the world would know his name, before medals and headlines, he was simply Dick, a quiet young man who dreamed not of glory, but of the perfect landing. When war came, that dream shifted. America was calling for pilots, men who could take to the air and meet the enemy on equal terms. The Japanese Zero dominated the Pacific skies, its agility unmatched, its pilots seasoned and lethal. American forces needed someone, to change that balance. And they found it in men like Bong. He trained at Luke Field in Arizona, under the relentless desert sun. There, instructors noticed something unusual. Bong's flying wasn't flashy, it was precise. His control over the aircraft was exact, almost mathematical. He didn't rely on instinct alone. He studied every movement, every angle, every burst of the engine. He saw flight not just as action, but as art guided by science. That difference would make him deadly in the skies to come. When Bong was assigned to the 9th Fighter Squadron, the Flying Knights of the 49th Fighter Group, he arrived in New Guinea just as the Allies were beginning to claw their way back from defeat. The airfields were muddy, the jungle thick with malaria and heat, and every mission meant life or death. It was here that Bong first encountered the P-38 Lightning, the twin-engine fighter that would become his signature. The P-38 was unlike anything else in the air. Sleek, fast, and built like a predator, it could outclimb and outrun nearly every Japanese aircraft. Bong understood its nature immediately. He didn't see a machine. He saw a partner. He named his plane Marge, after his sweetheart, Marjorie Vattendahl, whose photograph he taped to the fuselage just below the cockpit. That small photograph would soon become a symbol known across the Pacific. A promise carried into every battle. Bong's first combat experiences were quiet lessons. He watched how others flew, how they fought, and, most importantly, how they died. He studied the tactics of the Japanese Zero, learning its strengths and its fatal weaknesses. The Zero could outturn almost anything, but it couldn't match the Lightning's speed or durability. Bong built his entire strategy around that truth. He developed what would later become known as energy fighting, using altitude and speed as weapons, not just firepower. He would dive from above, strike fast, and climb away before the enemy could react. No fancy maneuvers, no wasted motion. Every burst of his guns was short, 2 seconds, sometimes 3, and almost always fatal. By December 1942, he had achieved his first confirmed kills. But unlike other aces who celebrated their victories, Bong remained detached. "I was just doing my job," he told a reporter months later. Those words would become his legacy. Quiet, honest, and sincere. His fellow pilots described him as calm under pressure, even playful on the ground, but utterly focused in the air. He would walk to his aircraft humming softly, often joking with mechanics moments before takeoff. Then, as the engines roared to life, his demeanor changed. He became all precision and purpose. The Japanese soon learned to fear the twin silver shape that came out of the sun. By early 1943, Bong's score had climbed rapidly. He would return from missions with 2, sometimes 3 confirmed victories, each meticulously verified by his gun camera. His commander, General George Kenney, recognized not only Bong's skill, but his value as a symbol. In a war desperate for heroes, Bong was the perfect example. Humble, relentless, and victorious. Kenny promoted him, and with each new mission, Bong's legend grew. But even as his fame spread, his humility never changed. When asked how he managed so many victories, he simply said, "I just get close enough to see the rivets." Behind those modest words was a science of precision. Bong never fired unless he was within 200 yards, sometimes closer. He believed in certainty, not luck. "You don't spray and pray," he once told a rookie pilot. "You aim, fire, and go home alive." The psychological toll of aerial combat was immense. Pilots who started full of bravado often ended quiet and hollow-eyed. Every time they strapped in, they knew it might be their last. But Bong seemed to carry a calmness others drew strength from. He led by quiet example, not command. His wingmen trusted him completely. No one under his protection was ever lost in combat. That record would remain unmatched. By mid-1943, Bong had already become America's leading ace in the Pacific. Yet despite his growing fame, he refused to act like a hero. He wrote letters to Marge filled with small details: the weather, the mosquitoes, the long stretches of waiting. Between the lines, though, was exhaustion, not physical, but moral. He felt the burden of surviving when others didn't. The war in New Guinea was brutal. Pilots who weren't killed in combat often fell to disease, crashes, or sheer fatigue. Bong survived by discipline, by instinct, and perhaps a measure of luck. Each mission blurred into the next. Names of fallen friends filled the bulletin boards. The squadron celebrated victories with muted relief, not joy. Then, in October 1943, Bong scored his 21st victory, breaking the record previously held by Eddie Rickenbacker, the top American ace of World War I. Overnight, he became a national hero. The newspapers called him America's Ace of Aces. Magazines printed his photo, smiling awkwardly beside his P-38, Marge's picture gleaming under the canopy. But Bong wasn't built for celebrity. When he was ordered home for war bond tours and public appearances, he obeyed, but reluctantly. He hated the attention. Crowds cheered. Reporters begged for stories. He gave short, polite answers and tried to deflect the praise. He often told them, "The real heroes are the ones still out there." Those weren't empty words. He meant them. Behind a calm exterior, Bong felt restless. Every day away from the front made him uneasy. He missed the sound of engines, the feel of the stick in his hands, the responsibility of his squadron. To him, the speeches and parades were a distraction from what mattered, the fight. By early 1944, he was back in the Pacific, flying again. Though his superiors tried to limit his missions, they couldn't afford to lose him. His presence alone boosted morale. But Bong was unstoppable. He found ways into combat zones, claiming he was merely escorting others, only to return with fresh kill confirmations. His technique was unmatched, efficiency in motion. He never wasted bullets. His bursts were short, precise, and always devastating. Fellow pilots said he seemed to anticipate the enemy's moves before they happened, as if he saw invisible patterns in the chaos of dogfights. To Bong, air combat was not a duel of emotion, but a problem of geometry, solved with speed and accuracy. By late 1944, his total victories had reached 35. The U.S. Army Air Forces realized they were witnessing something that would never happen again. He wasn't just breaking records, he was redefining aerial warfare. He had turned the P-38 Lightning into a scalpel, a weapon of surgical precision. And yet, Bong never believed himself a legend. He still wrote to Marge with the same humility, "Don't worry about the numbers. I just want to get home." He didn't know it then, but his greatest honor and his greatest tragedy were still ahead. He had become a legend, name spoken with awe in briefing tents and on factory floors, from the jungles of New Guinea to the assembly lines of California. Richard Ira Bong, the quiet farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, had risen to become the very symbol of American air superiority. His courage and skill had turned him into more than a soldier. He had become an idea, living proof that determination and discipline could outfly any enemy. When news of his 40th confirmed victory reached the press, the story spread across the nation like wildfire. Newspapers hailed him as the Ace of Aces, a title that no one would ever surpass. Magazine covers featured his face, modest, youthful, almost shy, beneath the confident gaze of a man who had seen war up close. Radio announcers recounted his exploits to families gathered around living room sets, painting him as the embodiment of the American fighting spirit. Even Life magazine devoted a photo spread to him, framing him not just as a hero, but as the son every mother could be proud of. The War Department, realizing the value of his story, sent Bong on a nationwide war bond tour. He didn't ask for it. He didn't want it. But he accepted the orders with the same quiet sense of duty that had defined his entire military career. For 2 months, Bong traveled across the United States, from bustling cities to remote towns, standing before overflowing crowds. He spoke to thousands of factory workers, young cadets, and veterans in rehabilitation wards. Every handshake, every photo, every word he spoke helped sell millions in war bonds, fueling the machinery that sustained the Allied advance. At each stop, mayors handed him keys to their cities. Women wept when they saw him in uniform. Children tugged at his sleeves, asking about his airplane, Marge, and the battles he'd fought. He smiled politely, shook hands, posed for photos, but inside, he felt the weight of guilt pressing down. In letters to his fiancée, Marge Vattendahl, he confessed his discomfort. "I don't belong on a stage," he wrote. "My place is in a cockpit. My squadron is still fighting. Every day I'm away from them feels like I've failed them." He hated fame. He hated the speeches, the applause, the parades. To him, it felt undeserved. He wasn't chasing glory. He was just doing his job. Yet his humility only amplified his legend. Everywhere he went, productivity spiked, morale soared. Factories reported record output after his visits. Young men enlisted in droves, inspired not by the thrill of war, but by the quiet dignity of a man who embodied courage without arrogance. General George C. Kenney, who had commanded Bong through most of his career, understood what Bong represented, and the danger that came with it. He knew that as Bong were killed in action, it would devastate the nation's morale. So when Bong requested to return to active duty in the Pacific, Kenney faced a dilemma. The public wanted its hero safe, but Bong, restless and loyal to his men, wanted back in the air. Kenney compromised. Bong was reassigned as an advanced gunnery instructor at 5th Air Force Headquarters. His orders were clear: train pilots, improve doctrine, and avoid combat unless absolutely necessary. But Bong wasn't one to sit idle. Avoid combat wasn't the same as refuse it. Flying out of Tacloban during the Philippines campaign, Bong found himself almost magically, it seemed, in the exact place Japanese aircraft appeared. His official role was to mentor young pilots, but the sky still called to him. Every time the enemy appeared, Bong was there, calm, calculated, deadly. His methods were surgical. He fired only at close range, often less than 100 yards, with short, controlled bursts. He never chased a kill into danger. He attacked, disengaged, climbed away. It wasn't bravado, it was mathematics, Precision, the same tactical mind that had once studied farm equipment manuals and engine mechanics, now applied the same logic to aerial combat. Every movement had a purpose. Every kill was confirmed by gun camera footage. There were no inflated numbers, no ghost victories, just results. As his tally climbed past 30, then 35, then 38, even his commanders grew uneasy. His legend was now larger than life. But his life was still fragile. One miscalculation, one mechanical failure, and the symbol America adored could vanish. When Bong reached 40 victories in December 1944, General Douglas MacArthur personally stepped in. He awarded Bong the Medal of Honor in a solemn ceremony at Tacloban Airfield. It was a humid day, sunlight glinting off the wings of the P-38s parked in formation behind them. MacArthur, usually theatrical, spoke quietly this time. "Major Richard Ira Bong," he said, "you have ruled the air from New Guinea to the Philippines. Today, I induct you into the society of the bravest of the brave." He pinned the medal onto Bong's chest, a gesture filled with sincerity. Soldiers, pilots, and ground crews watched in reverent silence. Cameras rolled, immortalizing the moment. In the newsreels that followed, America saw not a warrior celebrating victory, but a humble man, shifting uncomfortably beneath the weight of his own legend. Only 5 days later, Bong scored his 40th and final aerial victory, a brief, decisive engagement where his 3-second burst obliterated a Japanese fighter midair. The footage was clear and cold. No hesitation, no drama. Just deadly precision. With that, the record was sealed. America's ace of aces had written his name into history. General Kenny knew it was time. "He's done enough," he told MacArthur. "If we lose Bong now, it will be more than just another casualty. It will break something in this country." The decision was made. Bong would be sent home for good. When he returned to the United States in early 1945, he was greeted as a national treasure. Newspapers splashed his photo across the front page. Crowds cheered his arrival. Reporters hounded him with questions. But the country wasn't just fascinated by the pilot. They wanted to know about Marge. She had been the quiet presence behind every headline, the name painted on his P-38's nose. On February 10, 1945, Richard Bong and Marjorie Vattendahl were married in Superior, Wisconsin. The ceremony was small by Hollywood standards, but enormous in sentiment. Hundreds gathered outside the church to catch a glimpse of them. The bride wore white. The groom, his Air Force uniform and Medal of Honor. Their smiles spoke of peace, of a future that finally seemed possible after years of chaos. For a brief moment, the war faded. The honeymoon was simple, joyful, filled with plans for a home, a family, a future. Bong had accepted a new role as a test pilot for Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, working on America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. It was the perfect transition. He could stay in the air, but leave the killing behind. But the jet age was still young and unforgiving. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Major Bong climbed into a gleaming new P-80 at Lockheed's Burbank Airfield. The flight was routine, a simple acceptance test. He had flown the aircraft before, logged a few hours in it, and felt confident. Witnesses watched as the jet accelerated down the runway, its sleek fuselage slicing through the air. Then, just after takeoff, black smoke puffed from the engine. The aircraft rolled, leveled, then plunged nose down. The canopy flew off. Bong ejected, but he was too low. The parachute had no time to open fully. He hit the ground with fatal force, moments before the P-80 exploded. The timing was cruel beyond imagination. News of his death reached the public the next morning, August 7, 1945, sharing front-page space with the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The irony was haunting. The man who had survived hundreds of dogfights against the Japanese Air Force had perished in California. On the same day, America ushered in the weapon that would end the war. Marge Bong was shattered. They had been married barely 6 months. He survived everything the Japanese threw at him, she said years later. Then he came home and died testing a plane made by his own country. It still doesn't seem real. Her grief was echoed by the nation. Telegrams of condolence poured in from generals, presidents, and ordinary citizens. The funeral in Poplar drew thousands. General Kenny attended in person, tears in his eyes. The local high school band played softly as Bong's casket, draped in the American flag, was lowered into the earth. The boy who had once watched airplanes from a Wisconsin field had become one of history's greatest aviators. He was 24. In the years that followed, his name became immortal. Airfields, museums, schools, and even bridges were named in his honor. The Richard I. Bong Veterans Historical Center was built in Superior, preserving his story for generations who would never see the world he flew through. His P-38 tactics, his disciplined bursts, his use of energy, his patience, became the foundation of fighter pilot training for decades. Even in the jet age, his principles remained timeless. Think before you act. Fight only when the odds are right, and never waste a bullet. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, one of the few who survived the war with over 60 kills, once admitted that the P-38 pilots had broken the spirit of the Zero squadrons. They chose when to fight, he said. They fought on their terms, and when they struck, it was like thunder. Sakai never met Bong, but he respected him. Every Japanese pilot did. Bong's official decorations were staggering: the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 7 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and 15 Air Medals. Yet those who knew him best said he never cared for medals. His favorite line remained, "We're just doing our job." When his crash site in Papua New Guinea was rediscovered in May 2024, nearly 80 years later, it reignited a sense of reverence for a man whose legend had never faded. The P-38's twin engines, still faintly showing traces of red paint, were uncovered in a ravine, the same Marge that had once ruled the skies. His surviving sister, then 99 years old, wept with relief. The story had finally come full circle. Richard Ira Bong's legacy is more than numbers. 40 confirmed victories, 200 missions, hundreds of lives inspired. His true victory was not in the planes he shot down, but in the standard he set, the unshakable belief that precision and principle could triumph over chaos. And 15 air medals, yet those who knew him best said he never cared for medals. His favorite line remained, "We're just doing our job." When his crash site in Papua New Guinea was rediscovered in May 2024, nearly 80 years later, it reignited a sense of reverence for a man whose legend had never faded. The P-38's twin engines, still faintly showing traces of red paint, were uncovered in a ravine, the same Marge that had once ruled the skies. His surviving sister, then 99 years old, wept with relief. The story had finally come full circle. Richard Ira Bong's legacy is more than numbers. 40 confirmed victories, 200 missions, hundreds of lives inspired. His true victory was not in the planes he shot down, but in the standard he set, the unshakable belief that precision and principle could triumph over chaos. He died young, but what he achieved in 24 years would take most men a lifetime. He taught the world that courage isn't loud, that heroism isn't arrogance, and that greatness can come from the quiet heart of a small-town boy who simply refused to quit. He was the ace of aces, America's deadliest pilot, and for as long as men and women take to the skies in defense of freedom, the name Richard Ira Bong will never be forgotten. As the echoes of history fade into the distance, we're left with the haunting realization that war may end, but its shadows linger in the hearts of those who lived it. The choices made, the lives lost, and the lessons written in fire and steel. They all remind us that history is never just the past. It's the mirror of what we might become again. If this story moved you, if it made you feel history instead of just hearing it, then don't let it end here. Subscribe now so you never miss the next chapter of humanity's most defining moments. Because every battle, every forgotten soldier, every untold story deserves to be remembered. Stay till the end screen and choose your next journey through the fires of World War II. Will you uncover the secrets behind the last days of Nazi Germany? Or witness the turning tides at Midway? The past is waiting. Let's step into it together.